I stayed silent for nearly 2 decades, and now I can't anymore. At 79 years old, I have to speak up for myself and for those who once believed in the perfect marriage between me and Carl Dean. You thought Carl Dean and I were the symbol of everlasting Southern love, a picture of happiness, that he was the gentle rock behind every song. But what if I told you that same man was the reason I cried backstage every single night? Would you believe me? What if I told you that for 50 years I lived between love and captivity, between music and silence, between fame and fear? Would you dare keep listening? You know, there were days I woke up to the sound of the door closing and knew he wasn't coming back. You saw me smile on stage, but behind the lipstick were sleepless nights spent writing songs just to save myself from a suffocating marriage. Today, I will share 5 tragedies that have never been revealed about my marriage to Carl Dean. Tragedies that shattered my heart, shook Hollywood, and made the world ask itself, does the perfect man everyone admires really exist? The only question is, do you have the courage to hear me through to the end? No, he didn't see it. I have to admit, I don't know whether you saw the show last time or you've said this publicly before. I still remember it so clearly. That day in Nashville, 1964, the sun was shining, golden like my hair back then, and I had just walked out of my very first recording studio carrying a torn suitcase filled with a few songs I believed could change my life. I had no idea that fate was waiting just outside the corner. An old pickup truck pulled over. A man stepped out, dark hair, a slow smile, and eyes so deep it felt like they could see right through the cheap makeup on my face. He said, "You're as beautiful as moonlight strumming through a guitar." I laughed. It was the first time I'd ever heard someone describe a girl with music. His name was Carl Dean, a humble farm owner, quiet, not one for parties. And me, I was a dreamer chasing the sky with all the ambition I had. 2 people from 2 different worlds. But in that very moment, music met love, and I thought I had found my very first duet. Those early days were sweet. He brought me out to the suburbs, cooked dinners with corn and beans, kept the radio playing all night with Patti Cline and Hank Williams. We had no money, but I had him, the only one who called me Dolly, not the star, just my girl. I sang to him in that little kitchen, my voice trembling with happiness. He listened, smiled, and said, "Don't let the world take you away." I laughed silly. What world could ever take me away? If only I had known what was coming, maybe I would have stayed quiet. Because just a few years later, the world did come knocking. And it didn't just take me from that little kitchen. It took the peace from my heart too. I still remember so clearly that morning in March 1967 when my first album, Hello, I'm Dolly, was officially released. I stood in the RCA studio, my hands shaking so hard I had to grip the microphone just to keep from dropping it. That was the day all of Nashville finally saw me. After years of singing with my guitar in a small church back in Seville, I had finally touched my dream. I looked around, people raising champagne glasses, laughing, taking pictures. But in the middle of all those flashing lights, I saw only one face. Carl, my husband, standing quietly in the corner, his eyes warm but distant. When I walked over, he whispered softly, "I'm proud of you, but don't let the world take you away." I laughed then, thinking he was just being overly cautious. I didn't know that just a few years later, that very world would take both of us bit by bit, piece by piece. Starting in 1967, I began appearing regularly on The Porter Wagoner Show, one of NBC's most popular shows at the time. Porter and I quickly became a beloved on-screen duo. Every time we filmed, we performed in front of hundreds of people, and Porter always knew how to make me laugh, even when I was nervous. He used to say, "You were born to be on stage, Dolly. Sing like it's your last day." Those words made me feel strong, made me feel like I mattered. But I didn't realize that while I was singing for millions, the one person I ever truly wanted to sing for, Carl, was slowly being pushed out of my world. Every time I came home after a show, he'd be sitting on the porch, staring into the distance, holding a cup of cold coffee. He didn't say much. I'd ask, "Did you see me on TV?" He'd answer, "I don't like watching my wife belong to the audience." I'd laugh, trying to soothe him. "It's just a job, that's all." But his only reply was silence. And in that silence, I heard something inside me begin to crack, quietly but unmistakably. By the early 1970s, my career was exploding. Joshua hit #1 on the Billboard Country Chart in 1971. Code of Many Colors became an anthem. I toured non-stop, Memphis, Dallas, then Los Angeles. Everywhere I went, the audience loved me. They called my name, asked for autographs, hugged me with tears in their eyes. I felt loved. I felt alive. But every time I came home, I had to face the cold stare of the man who once held me close in that tiny house. He'd ask, "Are you happy?" I'd nod. He'd smile. "That's good." "I'm not." That was all. No blame, no anger. But sometimes it's the calmest words that cut the deepest. I tried to make it work, cutting tours short, spending more time at home. But the distance between two people isn't measured in time, it's measured in feeling. And we had lost each other long ago. In October 1973, I released Jolene. The song quickly climbed to #1 on the Billboard Country Chart, becoming a tune sung across America. People asked me, "Who is the real Jolene in real life?" I gave a half smile and said she was just a girl I met at the bank. But deep down, I knew Jolene was a metaphor for my fear. The fear that one day love would be taken not by another woman, but by the very thing I was chasing, the spotlight, the applause, and the fame. I wrote Jolene one night after calling home and no one picked up. 3 rings, then 4, then 5. When he finally answered, his voice was cold. "I'm busy, Dolly. You just do your thing." I stayed silent. I could hear the ticking clock in the living room. Tick, tick, like a countdown to something about to be lost. That night I sat next to my guitar and wrote the lyrics through tears. No one knew that in the line, "Please don't take my man," was a plea I sent to my own marriage. A year later in 1974, I wrote, "I Will Always Love You." The song was born the moment I decided to leave the Porter Wagoner Show after 7 years together. People said it was my farewell to Porter. That's true. But it was also a goodbye to Carl, the man I had lost while still living with him every day. When I recorded the song at RCA Studio B under the pale yellow light, I sang the last line, "And I will always love you." And my voice cracked. I cried in the studio. No one understood why I cried. I said it was because I was leaving a colleague. But the truth was, I cried because I knew I had said goodbye to love long ago and never dared to admit it. I sent the record to Carl. A week later in the mailbox, I found a handwritten note. "Beautiful song. I understand." That was it. "No, I love you. No, I miss you." Just 3 words. I understand. And I knew that when a man says, "I understand," it means he stopped trying. From then on, between us was silence. No shouting, no scandals, no back and forth. Just 2 people living under the same roof who no longer spoke. I went on tour. He stayed home. I came home. He pretended to sleep. Sometimes I tried to make coffee for him, left a small note on the table. "I'm home." But the next morning, the coffee was cold and the note was still there. I remember once during an interview, a reporter asked, "What's the secret to a long-lasting marriage?" I smiled. "We give each other freedom." The whole studio laughed, but inside I just thought, freedom also means letting go. In October 1977, I released "Here You Come Again," a song marking my transition from country to pop. It reached #3 on the Billboard Hot 100, helping me become one of Nashville's rare crossover artists. I traveled all over the U.S., from The Tonight Show to Good Morning America, from the New York Times to Rolling Stone. I smiled, I shone. I made people believe I was happy. But at night, when I took off the heavy wig and wiped away the sparkling makeup, I looked in the mirror and saw only a pair of tired eyes. I realized the spotlight can make you shine, but it can also blind you to who you really are. And Carl, he drifted further away. One time I called him after a show in California, and he said, "I saw you on TV. You look different." I asked, "Different how?" He replied, "So different that I'm not sure I recognize the girl I married in 1966 anymore." In 1979, when I performed at the Hollywood Bowl, more than 15,000 people stood and sang along to "I Will Always Love You." The flashlights lit up like falling stars. I smiled and opened my arms to the crowd, but in that moment I suddenly remembered. The man who once told me, "Don't let the world take you away," had been erased from my life by that very world. I ended the song in tears. Everyone thought it was emotion. No one knew I was crying for someone still alive, but already a memory. By 1980, I starred in 925 with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. The film was a huge success, and the theme song reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, earning me a Grammy. All of Hollywood called me a superstar. But under the lights, I felt lonelier than ever. The night I brought the Grammy home, I placed it on the kitchen table. Carl looked at it, then said, "It's beautiful, but I wish it was a cake you baked for me." I laughed, but that laugh broke into a silent ache, because I understood he didn't need a great wife. He needed a present one, and I had never truly been there. In 1982, I completed the film, The Best Little House in Texas. The final scene wrapped at 2 in the morning. Everyone hugged and celebrated, but I sat still, not smiling, not speaking. A production assistant asked, "Miss Dolly, why so sad? The film's a hit." I replied, "Because every time I reach a new height, I lose someone else behind me." That night, I called Carl. He answered. I asked, "Are you okay?" He chuckled softly. "I'm fine. How about you, my movie star?" I said, tired. Then silence. We didn't say anything else. After a few seconds, I heard him gently say, "You're crying, and I don't even know it, huh?" I swallowed my tears. "No, you don't." That was the last thing we ever said, as two people still in love, but no longer able to speak about love. After 1982, I came to understand one thing. There was no third person who destroyed my marriage. No betrayal, no lies, no scandal. Just one thing, the spotlight. It was dazzling, seductive, it lifted me high, and it also burned down everything I ever wanted to keep. I don't regret living fully for my music, but I still ache every time I remember the look in his eyes the night my first album launched. Warm, gentle, and almost prophetic. Don't let the world take you away. He was right. The world did take me away, and when it did, it took him too. Now, when I look back, I see that we didn't lose because of each other. We lost because we loved in two different directions. I loved the light. He loved the dark. I loved the audience. He loved the quiet. I wanted to sing for the whole world. He just wanted me to sing for him. And in that battle, no one won. Just an unfinished song, never fully sung. If someone asked me what killed that love, I'd say it wasn't a person. It was time, distance, and applause so loud that we could no longer hear each other. And if I could go back to 1966, I would still choose him. The man standing outside the laundromat telling me I looked as beautiful as moonlight strumming through a guitar. But maybe this time I'd hold his hand a little tighter and say, "If the world comes knocking, let's open the door together." Okay? Because now I understand the spotlight never kills anyone. It only kills those who forget to hold hands when it shines. I used to believe that silence was the best way to protect a marriage until that very silence became the weapon that killed everything. In the spring of 1974, just as I Will Always Love You was released, I suddenly saw my name all over the press. But what people were talking about wasn't the music. It was Porter Wagner. The Tennessean ran a bold headline. Dolly Parton leaves the man who once supported her to find freedom. Meanwhile, People magazine asked, "Was Porter Dolly's secret lover?" I laughed when I read it. I knew that what Porter and I had was purely professional, just years of standing together under the lights, sharing a dream. But to the public, two people of the opposite sex standing beside each other for that long surely had to mean something more. I didn't speak up, and Carl read every one of those articles in silence. He didn't ask, didn't accuse, he just drifted further away from me. In the months that followed, Porter started becoming possessive. He wanted me to stay on the show to continue performing as a duo because the audience adored Nashville's golden couple. But I couldn't. I had promised myself I would move forward. I had to stand on my own. In June 1974, while recording I Will Always Love You, I knew I was saying goodbye not just to Porter, but to a part of my past. But Porter didn't understand. He got angry, made calls all over town, and accused me of betrayal. In an interview with Music City News, he said, "She wouldn't be Dolly Parton without me." That sentence was like a knife slashing through my dignity, and unintentionally, it slashed right through my already fractured marriage. Carl read it. He threw the paper down on the table and asked coldly, "He really said that?" I could only nod. "Do you think he's wrong?" he asked again. I replied, "No, he's partly right." He gave a bitter laugh. And the other part, the part that includes me, I didn't answer. And in that moment, I knew we had reached the edge. Between 1975 and 1976, Porter sued me for over $1 million for breach of contract and exploiting our shared image for personal gain. I didn't want to fight. I was exhausted. But my lawyers said I had to respond. The legal battle dragged on for 2 years. The press called it the most expensive professional divorce in Nashville history. I appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone in 1977, my face lit dramatically under the headline, "Dolly's Tears Behind the Smile." They called me the new face of feminism, the woman who dared to rise from a man's shadow. But when I came home, there was only one other silent man, Carl, sitting in a dark room. He asked, "Did you win yet?" I said, "Win what?" he replied. "Win the world, lose the family." I didn't know how to argue with that. I just saw that something in his eyes had gone out for good. In 1977, I released Here You Come Again, the song that marked my entry into pop music and brought me to an international audience. The song won a Grammy, and I was invited to perform in Los Angeles, London, then Sydney. I slept in hotel rooms more than I did at home. I learned how to sleep under the dim lights of dressing rooms, and the more famous I became, the less I heard Carl's voice. He never called, he only sent short postcards. "Don't forget to eat. The garden's blooming. The dog's still waiting for you." I'd read them, cry, then get back on a plane. One time he surprised me by coming to the airport. I ran to hug him, but his arms were stiff. He quietly said, "Do you ever think about how lonely I've been?" I didn't dare answer because I knew if I admitted I was lonely too, it would only hurt us more. The press began linking my name to other men. First was Kenny Rogers after our 1983 duet Islands in the Stream. Then Burt Reynolds, my co-star in the best little WH house in Texas. The rumors were everywhere in National Enquirer and Globe. I didn't read them, but Carl read every word. One night in 1983, I came home and found him sitting in the dark, a newspaper spread out in front of him with a photo of me smiling next to Burt Reynolds at a premiere. He asked, "Is this true?" I said, "No." He sat silently for a long time, then said, "I believe you, but I don't believe in this life anymore." I understood when a man has to say that it means whatever faith he had left is about to fall apart. Around that time, my health began to spiral, pressure, exhaustion, and constant insomnia. In 1982, I collapsed right after finishing a film promotion tour. The doctor said I had nervous exhaustion. I took sleeping pills, tranquilizers, and still woke up in the middle of the night, hair soaked in sweat. Heart pounding, I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain outside the window, thinking about the man in the next room. I knew he was still there, still loyal, still loving in his own way, quietly, wordlessly. But we had become two lost souls under the same roof. One morning in 1984, I woke up and saw him packing. I asked, "Where are you going?" He said, "I just need some quiet." I cried, grabbed his hand. "If you leave, I won't be able to sing anymore." He turned back, looked at me for a long time, then gently said, "You'll still sing because singing is the one thing you can't stop doing, but I can't live beside someone who only sings for everyone else." He walked away, carrying a small suitcase and the last bit of peace I had. That night I performed at the Grand Ole Opry for the first time without him in the audience. I sang "Coat of Many Colors," the song about my poor childhood, about my mother sewing me a patched-up coat. Midway through the song, I choked up. The audience didn't understand. They thought I was moved by the memory. But the truth is, I was singing for someone who had just walked out of my life. After that, I fell into a real crisis. In 1985, I gained weight, sank into depression, and barely left my bedroom. I turned down interviews, canceled shows. The press wrote, "Dolly Parton, the golden icon of America, falls apart over love." I didn't deny it. I just stayed silent. Silence. What once had been a weapon now became a chain. I remember one night sitting alone in my Brentwood house, guitar in hand, writing dozens of lines only to tear them up. In the end, I could only write 4 words. "Love ain't easy, honey." And I broke down crying. Porter Wagner, the man who once sued me, sent me a letter. He wrote, "I'm sorry for the things I said. I understand now. You sing to survive. Don't let anyone take that voice away from you." I read it and smiled. Even the man who once resented me had come to understand. Only my husband never wanted to hear me sing. I knew he never hated music. He just hated the way music had turned me into someone else. At the end of 1985, I called Carl. His voice was still deep, still the same. I said, "I'm going back to the studio. I might write about us." He was quiet for a few seconds, then said, "Don't write about me, Dolly. I don't want to be the next chapter in your story." I stayed silent, listening to the wind outside hum against the power lines. Then he added, "But if you do write that I loved you. I just wasn't strong enough to hold on to you." I collapsed onto the table and cried like a child because in that one sentence, I didn't just hear goodbye. I heard the final song of a lifetime of love. From 1974 to 1985, there was never truly a third person between us. The other was the spotlight, the applause, the headlines, the whole world I couldn't switch off. I lived for the stage. He lived for peace. I once thought I could hold on to both, but it turns out one hand can only grip one thing. I chose music, and music, though it saved me, also killed me in its own quiet way. Now looking back, I understand that love doesn't die in betrayal. It dies when two people stop talking. We once had it all. Honesty, trust, simple years together, but we lost it piece by piece to silence. I don't blame him. I only wish I had learned to say I'm sorry sooner. I wish he had said, "I need you one more time." But by then it was too late. And so, in the winter of 1985, I stood on the stage of the Country Music Association Awards singing "To Know Him Is to Love Him," a song I dedicated to everyone who had ever loved me. The spotlight beamed down and the auditorium fell silent. I sang with a trembling voice, knowing that somewhere out there, someone was sitting alone in the dark, listening to that song on the radio and understanding that every lyric was my final message to him. As the last note faded into the air, I looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "I still love you, just not in a place where you can hear it anymore." In 1986, I was 40 years old, and for the first time in my life, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. The eyes in the reflection no longer sparkled with the glow of the Grand Ole Opry stage. They were dull, tired, shadowed by years of sleepless nights, sleeping pills, and a loneliness no one seemed to understand. I used to think fame could save me from sadness, but now I know sometimes fame is just a gold-plated room where you cry alone. In May 1986, I opened Dollywood, a theme park bearing my name in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, just a few miles from where I was born. The whole country came to see it. People magazine called it the South's economic miracle. Everyone smiled, everyone cheered, but I trembled. I wasn't happy. I saw thousands of people in that crowd cheering, and amid their laughter, I heard the echo of my own voice from many years ago, a little girl with a guitar singing in the hills. Dollywood was born from a beautiful dream, but it was also my way of trying to fill an emptiness I couldn't name. I poured all my money, strength, and heart into it, as if the brighter that place shone, the less I'd hurt. But that first night after the grand opening, I returned to my hotel room, took off my wig, peeled off my lashes, and cried until morning. No one saw, no one knew. Carl didn't come to the opening. He said, "Crowds aren't my thing." I nodded, pretending to understand. But inside, another part of me died. I began to realize he hadn't left me. He had simply chosen to live in another world. A world where the light is never too harsh, where people still hear birds instead of applause. And I stayed on the other side, where the cheering drowned out every other sound. After 1986, I fell into a deep depression. My eating was erratic. I gained weight, then lost it, couldn't sleep, and felt completely drained. Many nights I sat awake, staring out the window of my Brentwood home, the moonlight spilling cold and white across the yard. I'd see the swing he used to sit on, empty. I missed him, but didn't have the courage to call. I was afraid of the ringing, afraid of the silence that might come after. I turned to music just to survive, but every time I opened my mouth to sing, I felt my heart shake. I sang Eagle When She Flies in 1991. But the truth is, I wasn't the eagle. I was a wounded bird trying to fly through the last stretch of light. That same year, I reunited with two dear friends, Emil Harris and Linda Ronstadt, to record the album Trio. 3 female voices, 3 souls who had fallen for different reasons. When we sang To Know Him Is to Love Him, I was no longer singing about any one man. I was singing to God. I was singing about the forgiveness I hadn't yet learned. Emmylou put her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Dolly, you can forgive the whole world except yourself." I looked at her and smiled sadly because she was right. I had never forgiven myself for trading an honest man for millions of strangers. I had never forgiven this voice for singing so loud. It drowned out the sound of my own heart. In August 1988, I was diagnosed with chronic stomach issues and hormone exhaustion, the result of prolonged stress. I was hospitalized at Nashville Baptist Hospital. The media reported it as a brief rest. But the truth was, I spent 3 weeks there inside 4 white walls, thinking about everything I had lost. I remember writing in my journal, if I could trade every award for one honest hug, I would. No one believed that Dolly Parton, the woman who always smiled, always sparkled, could be that broken. But between 1986 and 1989, I nearly lost all faith in myself. Then one day, I walked into a small church in Nashville. No press, no cameras. An elderly pastor asked me, "What are you here to find?" I said, "I don't know. Maybe silence." He replied, "Silence has its own voice, Dolly. You just need to learn how to listen." I sat there listening to the wind slipping through the window frame, to the sound of leaves falling. And for the first time in years, I didn't think about the stage, the audience, or Carl. I thought about myself, about the 10-year-old girl who once stood singing in a little church, voice trembling, but believing God was listening. I cried, sobbed like a child. And when I rose from that wooden pew, I knew I had found a piece of my soul again. After that, I returned to the studio. The album White Limousine came out in 1989, featuring the song He's Alive. I didn't write it to turn music into a sermon. I wrote it to say that I was still alive, alive after everything inside me had died. When I sang He's Alive, it felt like I was telling my own story. A woman who had touched the heights of fame, fallen into the hell of loneliness, and still stood up even with trembling hands and knees. I realized fame can't save you, but faith can. In 1990, I decided to spend more time back in Tennessee. I returned to Dollywood, not to manage, but to quietly watch the visitors smile. I saw children running around with cotton candy in hand, eyes glowing with joy. I heard country music playing throughout the park, my own voice echoing from the loudspeakers. And strangely, hearing myself again, I didn't feel pride or sorrow. I just felt peace. Carl began to show up every now and then. He was still quiet, still reserved, but for the first time in many years, I saw him smile as he watched me perform during a small opening event at Dollywood. He said, "I like hearing you sing here more. Hear you sing for real." I looked at him, tears falling freely. Maybe he was right. Maybe after all these years, I finally understood. Singing isn't about being loved. It's about remembering that I once loved. In February 1991, when Eagle When She Flies was released, Billboard wrote that I had returned as a woman who no longer needed saving. I read that line and laughed because no one really knew. I had stopped looking for someone to save me a long time ago. I was just learning how to forgive myself. I forgave the spotlight for blinding me, forgave the applause for making me deaf, forgive the music for costing me a man, and most of all, I forgave myself for loving too late and understanding too late. In 1992, Whitney Houston released her version of I Will Always Love You for the Bodyguard soundtrack. That song, the child I wrote on the night of goodbye, suddenly became a global phenomenon. It topped the Billboard Hot 100 for 14 weeks, breaking all-time records. I remember sitting in front of the TV, listening to Whitney's soaring voice and crying, not out of jealousy, but because I understood that song had lived another life, just like my love with Carl. Dead in silence, but never gone. I called Whitney and said, "You sang that song more beautifully than I ever could." She laughed. "No, Miss Dolly, that song was already too real to need any more beauty." That line brought me to tears because I realized love, even when broken, can become something beautiful if you dare to sing it out loud. By 1994, Carl started talking more. We never spoke about the past. We only talked about the present, about the garden, the rain, the new puppies. One day, he asked, "Are you still afraid of silence?" I said, "No, because I've learned how to listen to it." He smiled. "That's good because I never stopped hearing you sing, just in a different way." I smiled back, and for the first time in 10 years, that smile didn't taste bitter. In 1996, when I performed at the Grand Ole Opry for my 30th career anniversary, I chose to sing Coat of Many Colors again. As the melody played, the whole hall lit up like a sky full of stars. In the front row, Carl was there. His hair had turned silver, but his eyes were still steady. When I reached the final line, "One is only poor if they choose to be," he stood up and clapped. I froze, tears falling, but I finished the last note. For the first time, I understood love doesn't need to be held onto. It only needs to be forgiven. When the show ended, I walked backstage. He was waiting, holding a bouquet of white roses. He said, "You still sing like the first day." I replied, "And you're still the first reason I ever sang." We didn't hug. We didn't need to. We just looked at each other. Because some things, once lost, only need to be understood again. That's enough. In 1997, I turned 51. For the first time in decades, I no longer feared time. The lines on my face, the silver in my hair, the calluses on my hands from thousands of nights holding a guitar, all of it became proof that I had truly lived, loved, and lost. That same year, I began writing the first pages of a memoir, not to publish, but to understand myself. I wrote, "If anything remains after the lights go out, it's the love we never got to say." Carl was still with me. He never liked crowds, never liked Hollywood, never liked the stage, but he quietly followed me whenever I sang at small shows near home. He never stepped backstage. He sat far away among the crowd just to listen. I always recognized him, even with his hair nearly all gray. One time in 1999, after a show at Dollywood, I looked for him in the crowd, but couldn't find him. When I returned to my room, he had left a small note on the table. "I heard you sing my Tennessee Mountain Home." I still remember that house, and I still remember you. I held the note, my hands trembling like the first time I received a love letter at 19, because I knew for Carl, one line like that was an entire sky of emotion. As the new century began, I stopped chasing charts. I sang for the elderly, for children, for churches, for places where the audience only needed a genuine smile. In 2001, I released Little Sparrow, a simple, stripped-down album with no studio tricks. I told the label, "I don't need a gold record. I just need one song that makes someone feel warm." The album didn't top the charts, but it was deeply loved. I remember a fan sent me a letter that said, "I listened to Little Sparrow while in the hospital. I wasn't afraid to die anymore because your voice made me believe in something more beautiful." I read that letter and cried. For the first time, I felt my music had finally stepped out from under the shadow of fame. It wasn't saving me anymore, it was saving someone else. During the 2000s, I performed less. I spent more time at our farm near Nashville. Carl planted flowers, I wrote books, cooked, cared for our grandkids. A small life, but a warm one. We didn't talk much anymore. Some afternoons he'd sit reading the paper. I'd sit nearby mending clothes. Sunlight would stream through the window, lighting his trembling hands. I'd look and see his back slightly hunched, and I'd suddenly remember the day he stepped out of that old pickup truck in 1964 when he was young, and I still believed love was unchanging. I asked, "Do you regret anything?" He looked up, his eyes gentle, and said, "No, because I lived my life with the person I chose, and you sang for the whole world. We both did our part." That line made me cry because it wasn't just forgiveness, it was freedom. In 2005, I joined the Trans Am Project with the song "Traveling Through," a track written for those searching to find themselves. When the song was nominated for an Oscar, people asked if I was happy. I smiled and said, "Of course, but not because of the nomination. Because I wrote this song knowing that the journey to find yourself is 1,000 times longer than the road to Hollywood." I attended the ceremony in a white dress, its neckline lined with crystals. As I stepped onto the red carpet, I turned to a female reporter and joked, "If Carl were here, he'd tell me to go home, take off the dress, and cook dinner." Everyone laughed, but in that laughter, I knew he was still somewhere, watching in his own way, quietly and proudly. By 2011, we were celebrating 45 years of marriage. I decided to do a small photo shoot wearing my white wedding dress again. The press wanted to cover it extensively. I declined. I just wanted it to be ours. That day, a soft rain fell over Nashville. I asked, "Do you want to shoot outdoors?" He shook his head. "Wherever you want to stand, I'll be there." When the photographer raised the camera, I asked, "Are you going to smile?" He said, "No need. Your smile is enough." And in that moment, I knew everything I had ever chased for half a lifetime. The lights, the fame, the applause. None of it compared to one smile from him in that little room. After that, his health began to fade. He went out less, stayed mostly in the garden. Every morning I got up early to make coffee and softly sang, "You are my sunshine." He would listen, smile, and say, "You still sing so beautifully." I'd reply, "Because you're still the only one I want to sing for." When he smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepened, but within them, I saw the peaceful light I had searched for my whole life. One morning in 2016, I returned home after my pure and simple anniversary tour. He didn't come out to greet me like usual. I went into the house and found him asleep in his armchair. I gently touched his shoulder and whispered, "I'm home, Carl." He didn't respond. A chill ran down my spine. I called his name. Still no movement. I sat beside him, holding the same hand that had held mine back in 1966 during our secret wedding in Ringgold, Georgia. And I knew the final song of our lives had just come to an end. He left as gently as a song on the night of March 3rd, 2025. No tears, no noise, no grand funeral. I followed his exact wishes, the ones he'd once told me. When I go, don't cry for the cameras, just sing me a song, that's enough. That day, in our little room, it was just me, my guitar, and our wedding photo. I sang from here to the moon and back. My voice trembled, but it didn't break. When the final note faded into the air, I whispered, "Go home to God now, Carl. I'll see you again when my last song has been sung." After the funeral, I didn't speak to anyone for weeks. I just sat on the porch watching the sun set over the Tennessee hills. I thought about everything we'd been through: youth, fame, loss, the songs, the people I loved, and the man who stood by me for nearly 60 years. And I realized true love never ends, it just changes shape. From a hand to a ray of light, from a voice to the wind, from presence to memory. And memory is something no one, not even time, can ever take away. In 2020, I released a Holly Dolly Christmas during the pandemic. Everyone was at home, and the world felt strangely silent. I sat alone in the studio thinking of the old days. I imagined Carl, if he were still here, would smile and say, "You still won't take a break, huh?" And I'd answer quietly in my heart, "No, because I'm still singing for you." When I sang Mary, did you know my voice was lower, softer, but more honest than ever? I wasn't singing to be heard anymore. I was singing to say thank you. Thank you to God for a life full of light and shadow, of glory and tears, but most of all, of love. Now, every morning, I make a cup of coffee and look out the window where sunlight falls on the chair he used to sit in. I smile. I don't feel pain anymore. I feel peace, as if a part of him is still here in the air I breathe, in the music, in every lyric I'm about to write. I used to think fame was the miracle, but I've come to understand it's just temporary light. Real love is the only thing that doesn't fade. It can lead you astray, bring you to your knees, but it's also the very thing that leads you home. If there's one thing I want to tell the world now that I'm nearly 80, it's this: forgive. Forgive others, forgive yourself, forgive life for not turning out the way you hoped. Because when you learn to forgive, you'll start to hear music again. Not from a guitar, not from a stage, but from deep inside your heart. And when that music plays, every loss becomes a prayer. Every tear becomes a beautiful note. Today I still sing, not on the bright stages anymore, but in a small church where the light is soft and the music hums just enough. I sing not for anyone to hear, but to say to him, "I did it, Carl. I'm not afraid of the silence anymore. I believe somewhere he's still listening, still smiling. And when I close my eyes, I'll see him standing just beyond the lights, eyes gentle, reaching out his hand and saying, 'Come on, baby.'" The next song is Waiting. Love doesn't die, it just turns into light, guiding us home. And what about you? Leave a number 3 where your heart finds its way home.